Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Hope you all fine and enjoying your virtual learning classes. So, dear students, welcome you all in PIST Virtual Learning System session 2020. So, as you know that this is your computer science class and for grade first year boys and girls, and today we are going to start a new chapter, chapter number 4, inside the system unit. And this is our 16th video lecture. So dear students, today we are going to talk about inside the system unit. First of all, we will start unit introduction, then CPU and system unit, then computer casing, then exploring the system unit. So let's start with the first topic, that is the unit introduction. This unit presents information about the components of computer that exist inside the system unit. It describes the purpose of expansion cards that are installed on expansion slots on the motherboard or integrated on it. It also explains memory chips, cables used inside the system unit, and ports that are found at the back of the system unit for connecting input-output devices. So basically, this chapter introduces you how system unit compile and how this computer system combined with the help of different components. So this is inside the computer system. So look, you have a CPU. Whenever you will open your CPU, so you can check there is a main board. That board is called a motherboard, and on that motherboard we have different components. So when we combine different components, these components made a system. So this is a complete computer system. And system means that in general terms, if we will define the system, so when different components work together to achieve some common objective is called a system. In computer systems, we have different components which are based and hosted on a motherboard, and it will form a CPU and a complete system unit. After completing this lesson, you will be able to differentiate between CPU and system unit. There is a big difference between the CPU and the system unit. CPU is a central processing unit, and system unit basically is a combination of different components. That is a complete system. CPU is a microprocessor, is a small chip. Secondly, identify computer casing and its types. Then thirdly, define power supply and describe the components found on motherboard, BIOS, ports, expansions of cables, memory slot, disk controller, cooling system, and buses. Describe the ports, serial, parallel, PS2, USB, and firewire ports. Then identify sound, video, modem, and network cards. It will describe SIM, DIMM, SD-RAM, and DD-RAM. So after completing this chapter, inshallah, you will understand all these topics. So dear student, let's start with the system unit and CPU. System unit, case that holds the power supply, storage devices, and the circuit board, including the motherboard, is called a system unit. So computer, basically the computer system and the system, it's a different thing, and the CPU is a different thing. CPU is a central processing unit where the processing in a computer takes place, often called the brain of the computer. So system unit basically consists of different components, and as we discussed System means when different components work together. So in computer system, we have different components which work together to achieve some common objective. And the common objective may be a data processing, data storage, instruction processing, instruction execution. So this is a complete system, a complete system unit in which we have different components which are hosted on a motherboard. And CPU is a central processing unit. It is a brain of a computer. Sometimes it is called the microprocessor, and it is the most intelligent and important device of our computer system. So CPU basically is microprocessor. It's a small chip. Then CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. The CPU is the brain of the computer where most calculation take place. Without CPU, the computer would not work. So basically, CPU is a small microprocessor and which is used to execute your instruction. Central processing. Processing means to process your instruction. After processing, you can get your results. Central Processing Unit CPU controls the all operation of the computer. It is also called the brain of the computer and system unit. The CPU is responsible for handling all instruction it receives from the hardware and software running on the computer. The brain of a computer system where calculations and decisions are made, the main part of the computer that manages, stores, and use data. So CPU is a very important part of our computer system and the system unit. It's the central part and the major part of the computer system. So it is also called the brain of the computer system because it's work like a main part, like a human being. In human being, we have a brain which control all the activities. So like a human being in central processing unit, CPU is the important and the central part of computer system. System unit. The motherboard is the main circuit board of the system unit. A computer chip contains integrated circuits, contain expansion slots, processor chips, memory slots, also called system board. So in the system unit, basically it consists of a main board that is called the motherboard. On that motherboard, we have the small chips, expansion slots, memory slots, and all systems component hosted on that motherboard. This motherboard is sometimes called the main board, also known as a base unit. Main body of computer containing motherboard, power supply, cooling fan, internal disk drives, memory modules, expansion cord. The next topic is computer casing. Computer casing is a box or enclosure that contains most of the components of computer system. Computer casings are of two types, tower and desktops. As you can see in the picture, tower case and the desktop case. Tower casing is the most commonly used one. Normally we use tower case. Desktop casing is designed to keep on the desk and usually monitor is kept over it. So this is a tower casing which normally in the desktop computer we have. In normal PC we have tower casing. And in desktop casing, this is on the desk. It can keep on the desk and usually monitor is placed here at the top of this casing. So this is two types of casings. So dear students, tower case. So basically a vertical computer cabinet, a common design for servers and high performance workstation. Tower case have more room for storage and cards, expansions than horizontal desktop cases and all-in-ones. So in normal computers, we have the tower case and we can place our CPU in this casing. And basically this is a complete system unit. Inside it, we have the different components which tie up together. So why a computer case is important? What do you think, students? Why a computer case is important? There are several reasons why we use computer cases. One is for protection, which is easy to assume because it is the most obvious. Dust, animals, toys, liquid, can all damage the internal parts of a computer if the hard shell of a computer case does not enclose them and keep them away from the outside environment. Do you always want to be looking at the disk drive, hard drive, motherboard, power cables, power supply, and everything else that makes up the computer? Probably not. Hand in hand with the protection, a computer case also doubles as a way to hide all those parts of the computer that nobody really wants to see each time they look in that direction. Another good reason to use a computer case is to keep the area cool. Proper airflow over the computer components is one more benefit to using a computer case. While the case has special vents to allow some of the fan air to escape, the rest of it can be used to cool the component is power supply unit or a power supply. A power supply is a hardware component that supplies power to an electrical device. It receives power from an electrical outlet and converts the current from AC alternating current to DC direct current, which is what the computer requires. It also regulates the voltage to an adequate amount which allows the computer to run smoothly without overheating. The power supply an integral part of any computer and must function correctly for the rest of the components to work. So the purpose of a power supply in a computer is to convert alternative current AC to low voltage direct current DC for operation of components of the computer. So basically a power supply already fixed in the casing when it purchased. Okay, when you will purchase your computer system, so your power supply is already fixed in your computer casing. So you can view at the back side of your computer casing. So there is a fan which can use to exhaust the heat of your all components, and it is used to provide the power supply to all components inside the system unit. The next is motherboard. Motherboard. The another name is main board, the base board. A motherboard is the main printed circuit board PCB found in computers and other expandable systems. It holds many of the crucial electronic components of the system such as the central processing unit CPU and memory, and provides connectors for other peripheral devices. So basically in a computer system, the motherboard is a main board which is used to provide the support to all components. So if you want to install your memory card, so you have to install and put on this motherboard. Even if you want to paste and if you want to use the microprocessor, so you can host your microprocessor on a motherboard. So it will provide the support to all components. It have the expansion slots, it have the ports, so where you can place all the components inside the system unit. Now, what is motherboard? Motherboard is the main component of the CPU, backbone of the computer. It integrates all hardware components into one system, allows all parts of your computer to receive power and communicate with one another. So motherboard is also known as main board or a system board. Motherboard is sometimes called as main board or a system board. So motherboard, it is a circuit board that connects all the components for the computer system through ports, cables, and expansion slots. So here is a block diagram of your motherboard. So you can view these are the expansion slots which are used to expand your computer capabilities. You can extend your computer's graphics, modem like this. Here we have a speaker, sound card. Here is a USB port. Here is a mouse port, monitor port. These are USB ports, and these are also mouse and keyboard ports. These are the sockets for CPU, RAM slot. Here you can place your RAM memory. This is hard disk controller, FD. These are the BIOS, basic input output system. So this main board, this is a main board integrated circuit where we have different components, and this main board provide the support to all components. And with the help of these components, we can make a complete computer system, which is enclosed in a computer casing. Inside the computer casing, we have a motherboard, and on the motherboard, we have a different components, and all components are hosted on a main board motherboard. So here you can also view one more diagram. If you have a tower casing and your motherboard and your system unit is enclosed in a tower casing, so you can view how it looks inside. Here we have an optical disc, here we have a hard disk, this is our fan. Here is a power supply, this is the back side of your system unit. Power supply and fan. Here we have a connectors and the ports. Here we have a expansion slots, and this is a motherboard. So this is a motherboard. On the motherboard we have different components. So on the back side we have some ports, connectors, and expansion slots. Inside here we have a optical disk, floppy disk, hard disk. All disks are pasted here. So at the back side of our system unit, you can view there is a power connection, key lock. Here we have a fan, and blocking these can be dangerous. Fans, and these are the blocking. These can be dangerous, the particles, small particles. These are the mouse port, keyboard port, communication port, parallel port, communication port 2, speaker port, line 1, microphone, and MID port. So these are expansion cards and add-in. This is the back side of your CPU and the system unit. You can view, and remember that student, this is a tower casing. In the tower casing, you can see, you can view like this in the form of tower. Components in main body of internal structural chart of main body means that on the motherboard, the some components are here. The power supply, this is power supply unit, connected cables which can use to connect different components. Main board, motherboard, CD-ROM, hard disk, floppy disk. This is graphic cards, memory, RAM, DRAM. This is CPU, microprocessor, cooling wheel, or a fan. So all these are components which are work together and pasted and hosted on a motherboard and tie up with the help of the connected cable. A CPU socket uses a series of pins to connect a CPU processor to the PC's motherboard. If a CPU is connected via CPU socket, it is not soldered and can therefore be replaced. CPU sockets are more common with desktop PCs than they are on laptops. So basically the CPU sockets is used to mount the CPU or processor on the motherboard. CPU socket is used to mount the CPU or processor on the motherboard. The CPU socket is the connector on the motherboard that houses a CPU and forms the electrical interface and connect with the CPU. The CPU sockets are most common with the desktop PCs than they are on laptops. BIOS, Basic Input Output System. BIOS is the program a personal computer microprocessor uses to get the computer system started after you turn it on. It also manages data flow between the computer's operating system and attached devices such as the hard disk, video adapter, keyboard, mouse, and printer. So BIOS basically stands for Basic Input Output System. It is a non-volatile ROM chip. Basically, it is a non-volatile ROM chip. It is a firmware in which system programs are permanently stored by the manufacturer. These programs have two purposes. When the computer is turned on, it initializes the computer devices such as keyboard, mouse, hard disk, and then loads the operating system from the hard disk into the RAM and makes the computer ready for the operation. Secondly, it controls the basic input and output operation of all peripheral devices attached to the computer. BIOS also has setup utility that allow us to configure the computer hardware, select boot devices, set password, set the clock, and enable or disable computer components. So basically, BIOS stands for in basic input output information, and it is a non-volatile ROM chip. And whenever we will start our computer system, so basic information loaded from the BIOS. So it provides the support to load the operating system and provide the support all other peripheral devices. So with the help of those peripheral devices, we can load, the drivers are loaded, and we can start working on our computer system. So function of a BIOS are the BIOS chip start up the computer, load basic drives, load the operating system, check the hardware system, and load other BIOS programs on the computer. Features: the first instruction run by a computer are those from the BIOS chip. The internal clock of a computer runs off the BIOS chip. So BIOS is a basic input output information, and this is a firmware, and it's a type of a ROM. So we cannot, it's basically all information written on the BIOS at the time of our manufacturing. So we cannot alter it. So it's a basic information whenever you will start your computer system. So the basic information is loaded from the BIOS. Port. The hardware devices of the computer are connected to the ports. Ports are present on the motherboard of the CPU, in which the cables of the hardware devices are plugged in. They play a very important role in a computer networking. They act as an interface between the input devices and the output devices for effective data communication and processing. Computer ports is also known as communication port. Some examples of devices connected to the ports are keyboard, mouse, monitor, speaker. There are different kinds of ports available. So basically, computer ports are the physical interface where user can interact and attach all input and output devices easily. So basically it is an interface. If you want to attach any external devices with the computer system and you want to make them the part of a computer system, so ports are the interface and the connection. With the help of these ports, you can connect your devices easily. We have different types of ports. So if you want to attach the mouse with the computer system, so you can attach with the help of PS2 mouse port and the keyboard port. And on the other hand, nowadays we have USB port. If you want to attach the USB mouse, so you can attach it with the help of USB port. Then we have serial ports. So we can attach and we can use the serial port used for PDAs and serial devices. And it can use for the serial dial-up modem. Then we have a VGA port monitor. You can attach your monitor with the computer system. If you want to enhance the sound of your computer system, you can attach speakers, mic, microphone. And if you want to install and attach the printer, so you can attach the printer with the help of ports. So this is the back side of your computer system. If you want to increase the efficiency of your computer system and you want to make some external devices, peripheral devices, IO devices. IO means input and output devices, the part of a computer system. So you have to install on the port. You have to make the connection with the help of ports. So ports are a physical interface which is used to provide the connection between the external devices and the motherboard and the system board. Whenever you will connect the devices with the help of the ports, so these devices will become the part of your system unit. Then you can use those devices like keyboard, mouse, monitor, printer, USB. So you can attach with the help of the ports. Thank you so much, students. Inshallah, we will continue this topic in the next lecture. Till then, Allah Hafiz.